did the Lowell lecture event each year. This year we decided that we'd like to give the year to working on civil discourse. So we have had 3 events, and this is the 3rd of those events, where we turn to how do we actually do civil discourse in our communities, our churches and religious communities, our neighborhoods, our families, our work sites. So this is going to be a very special evening. Our 2 speakers are incredible. Tom Porter had breakfast with them this morning, and he sent me an email saying that he had the best conversation he's had in ages. These are 2 very wise men. This is how we're going to do it. We have, I'm going to introduce both of our speakers now, and the reason for that is we'd like to think of these events as woven together, even though each will speak separately, and we will reflect with each one separately. So I'm going to introduce the 2 together, and then we will hear from Bishop Jung, and after Bishop Jung has spoken, we will hear from 2 respondents, and then Honorable Yazzie will have a chance to enter into the discussion with Bishop Jung, and we'll open it to all of you. Then we'll have a stretch break, very brief stretch break to let our bodies do what our bodies need to do, and we'll come back and we will hear from Honorable Yazzie and repeat the cycle. We'll hear from the 2 respondents, very brief insights, questions, and from Bishop Jung. And the 2 of them then will dialogue, and again, we'll open it up to you. So that's the rhythm for the event, and we welcome you. We think this is going to be an exceptional evening. So let me begin by introducing, with a few words, 2 men who deserve barrels of words. Bishop Hee-Soo Jung is a bishop in the central jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church, having been elected in 2004. He's the bishop of the Wisconsin Annual Conference. And we have some of our graduates there now, and some who are headed there, so this is a nice connection to have. Before he was there, he served as a district superintendent, and he chaired the Department of Religion and Philosophy and was dean of the University Chapel at Gangnam University and Seminary in Gyeonggi-do, Korea. So Bishop Jung is a professor, a dean, a bishop, and a man of great integrity. Jung has served as pastor of congregations in Wisconsin, California, Texas, and Korea. And among the things he's done is when he served one congregation in Seoul, Korea, he was director of the Young Factory Workers Professional School. So he's been involved in urban ministry as well as many other forms of ministry. He's known among his colleagues and among those who've worked with him as someone who has been a major leader in peacemaking in Korea, as well as within church circles. He has worked with refugees, immigrants, and cross-cultural and interfaith relations groups. He served on the board of the General Commission on Christian Unity and Interreligious Concerns. He was on the Immigrant Task Force of the General Council of Finance and Administration for the United Methodist Church, and he has served on the United Methodist Committee on Relief, especially in their work in assisting refugees. He has also worked with many different communities, ecumenical communities and public communities in restorative justice and in building interfaith relations. We welcome you, Bishop Jung. It's such a privilege for us to have you. And I said something wrong. When I looked down, he is not the bishop in Wisconsin. You are the bishop in Wisconsin, but you were the bishop in Northern Illinois.
Yes.
And I meant to say that. So he was in Northern Illinois, based in Chicago, and now is in Wisconsin. I've got it straight now, right? The Honorable Robert Yazzie is well known around the world as a mediator, peacemaker, and a wise man. He is retired Chief Justice of the Navajo Nation. He served as Chief Justice from 1992 until 2003. He practiced law in the Navajo Nation for 16 years. He was district judge for 8 years. He studied at Oberlin College in Ohio, and he was also the director of the Diné Policy Institute of the Diné College, Navajo Nation. He has spent a great deal of his life developing policy using authentic Navajo thinking and applying the fundamental laws of the Diné to contemporary peoples and to contemporary problems. He is a member of the Navajo Nation Bar Association. He's a well-known author, and he's written and spoken a great deal on Navajo peacemaking, traditional Indian law, and international human rights law. He's a visiting professor still at the University of New Mexico Law School and a visiting member of the National Judicial College. He teaches Navajo law at the Navajo Technical College. I share that with you because I'd like you to be aware that the Honorable Yazzie is a man who relates to his people and to people all over the world from the wisdom of his people. And he relates to people in all different realms of life. He has a global audience because he is known as a bearer of wisdom, especially the traditional wisdom about justice and governance. We welcome you, Honorable Yazzie. Thank you very much for your presence here.
I'm so honored by your invitation to present this Lowell lecture, and I gave thanks to the faculty, students, and friends in Boston University community, especially the Dean Elizabeth and my dear friend Tom Porter, and my colleague Susan Hassinger, the bishops, and many of the friends that I met here. And it seems like this is a festivity week. Lots of interaction with the new Explorer student and family joining. And last night I arrived and I had a great 2-hour session with the Korean student community. We had they have a sharp question, so I was really put it to the corner. We had a great time together. Wonderful. It is such an honor to also be together with the former Chief Justice, the Honorable Yazzie, and this morning we had conversation at the breakfast table, but we walked into the hotel and I found out he's a kimchi lover. So I think when next time we will taste kimchi together, then we will be more engaging in this whole conversation. So it's so honored to be here tonight. My presentation will focusing on through my biographical experience, a journey from my embryonic womb, which is still truth in the social situation in Korean Peninsula, which is divided north and south, how I am brought up into that divided land as a young man. Then later that I'm engaging with my own family tradition, being a first Christian in my family, how I journeying into interfaith walk. Then with the more engaging with in the field and in the word, that I believe that offstage leadership that and I'm yearning to be that as a discourse for the future, for discourse for the present apple making, so that I'm focusing on those steps, and then hopefully we'll talk about some holy conferencing at the end. So I prepared the paper, but I'm kind of skipped here and there so that I can present it within half hour. That's the time that our promised time. My life began in a divided Korea, divided in post-colonial era, not by its own actions, but as a result of agreement between the superpower nations following Second War. So it was an agreement to create an ally for Soviet in the divided North and an ally for West in the South. So when you hear a frightening story about North Korea nowadays, right? Remember that their division from South was not of their own creation. The basic question has never been, why can North and South get along? But we did pretty well as the one nation until divided it by the colonial superpowers and foreign invasion. I lived on an island nearby the 38th parallel, which is a demilitarized zone area. So like in very clear weather like today, when you go to the mountain, you say yah-ho, then my friend in North say yah-ho back. So it's very close, swimming probably half hour, then we can reaching it to the boat. I lived on that parallel area. For years during my childhood, the Korean conflict had been taking place. Brothers in North had come to fear brothers in South, and sisters in the South feared those in the North. I remember that day when my friend and I were playing on the shore. He spotted something interesting in the water. He reached it for it. It was a mine that exploded upon touch. Instantly, nothing identifiable of my friend existed anymore. Only blood and flesh remained that where my friend had been moments before. But I remember him still. And in that remembrance, I pray for reconciliation and peace for peoples of Korean Peninsula. Whenever confrontation happens nowadays, just like that recent conflict, minds are clouded by feelings and memories of anger, revenge, guilt, and shame, built on generation of those who lived in the war period and extended long struggles. So victimization becomes an inner wound. It seems to me almost as an embryonic wound and scar, the part of my life from the very beginning. So in everyday life, I felt the memory of war. And an everyday societal phenomenon, it reminds me of such a scare and afraidness. And for many years, I lived through the episode of epidemic, the kind of like a more panic and post-traumatic syndrome in various times. The Rupert Rose, the author, say healing is often a lifelong journey. What it means is that all members of a team must reach a point in a healing path where they can share most of their stories with each other without fear of each other. So civility, civil discourse is difficult to maintain in ongoing tense ideological confrontations and protracted conflict between nations and people. Yet, if there is a hope for the future, we must seek conversation rather than confrontation. Which is, I really need to say to you that currently it's all language of mass media about Peninsula is about confrontation and war breaking. I hope that all countries surrounding the Peninsula engage some real way of conversation and discourse. Because isolation and also containment policy of our national security is not helping North Korea's isolation either. So we need to engage together to really honor the difference, yet to promoting the conversation is the matter, not the confrontation. Let me share about my own biological interfaith relationship. As a young man, I became a Christian. Actually, I was 60 years old. As a young Christian, I came to believe that my ways and beliefs were absolutely right. That everything of my Buddhist, Confucian, and shamanistic past was to be totally condemned. Now I realized at the time I had so much to learn. When my father died, I, as a young, elegant Christian, refused to participate in the ritual surrounding death that brought meaning and closure for my mother, siblings, and wider family. They went to mountain with his remains, as a tradition required, but I stayed back. Resistant to follow traditional family ritual, they brought prayer to the God beyond us all, but I refused to pray since this God was not specifically named as a God of Christians. My understanding of Christianity as a young convert had more to do with the rejection of everything that seems not specifically Christian than it did with adopting the way of Christ. Absolute. The truth isn't the best thing. Often it is too blunt, harsh, or out of place. It was not until much more recently, after my graduate study, that on return visit to my home village, and I made a mountain pilgrimage to my father's graveside, and there I repent of my arrogance and made peace with my father and my past. I have experienced the release and freedom in my heart. So then I remain proud of the rich heritage, and my interfaith journey has been a core of my spiritual quest. In my small village, a Methodist preacher had begun to build a church on the land provided to him by my grandfather. It was a remarkable, moving story how a Christian minister and my grandfather, traditional Confucian scholar, met each other and together pursued and engaged with each other in a true interfaith relationship. What I missed it most over the years, by not having family close by, is the sense that past is an open and growing manuscript, revealing stories and traditions, allowing for expansion of my understanding of the past and what forgiveness means. When we talk about past with the extended family, we often find that each of us remembers different aspects of the same experience. Though the difference in memory can sometimes lead a bickering, it is a relief to know that none of us has a sole responsibility for remembering. For what we may forget will be recalled by someone else. Even with my own family, my grandparents lived in fully engaged with interfaith relationship in those days. Grandfather was a Confucian scholar and practitioner, but my grandmother was a faithful Buddhist devotee. And so both traditions came down to my parents' generation for the interfaith relationship. Somehow though, it was harmonious. I didn't notice tension among Confucian practice and Buddhist faith. Even at the time, the practice added the additional strong elements and colors of a shamanistic festivity. And so the civility has been part of the language of the family ritual and religious practice. Actually, I was the one who brought the trouble to that family. When I became a Christian, I brought tense to the environment as I was intense in seeking to convert my siblings with missionary spirit. However, my grandparents recognized the new path in my Christian journey and were saddened to see departure from family traditional upbringing. Even though difference caused conflict, they did not hinder my involvement in new forms of spiritual activities. So gradually, the mutual respect and recognition allows for civil relationship among the various tradition in family dynamics. It is possible for me as a Christian to honor and celebrate my grandparents and parents' faith and practice. This family culture of civility in interfaith relationship led me to go deeper into the meaning of challenge and characteristic of the dialogue I understand and experience as growing together in the Spirit. It's like a few years ago that my second year as a bishop in 2006, we hosted one of the Hispanic lay leader, a woman who was deployed by INS order because she's undocumented. And she took the sanctuary in one of my church in Chicago. And that time we were kind of engaging with that I, as the person who need to protect her, and Bible and Christian tradition is really honored to guarding her, not to really, to interfere. Entire year it took. I know that is a Chicago Tribune say 85% disapprove my action and 15% might be honor that, or sometimes in different kind of a statistic they say. But during that whole time that I experienced such the great transforming presence from the Muslim brothers and sisters. Actually they supplied the entire year for the 1,000 gallon of water for those who visited, and also those who were, Elvira and her family resided in the church sanctuary. In some way, the civility is really available when we are deeply engaging this interfaith relationship, because the source, because of intention, and because of the relationship is always primary focus in our religious traditions. Let me share a little bit about civil discourse in offstage leadership. The difference a Methodist preacher made in my life was not through what he did it on stage on Sunday mornings, but what he did it off stage in his affirmation of me. I took him as a mentor. Thus I became a Methodist, and Methodist, though appreciating enough of my Buddhist heritage to acquire the doctorate study in Buddhism, following my training in the seminary community, and I become a United Methodist, and proud to be so, and ordained in Wisconsin, and elected as a bishop, and then now went back as a 9th year as a bishop in Wisconsin. On one hand, I come to see great possibility for the future, the possibility of United Methodism. During 8 years in Chicago area, we were able to defy national trend and growth membership and worship attendance. That conference found itself able to begin to move beyond its political polarization and petty competitions. But ongoing arguments are what I see dominating United Methodist life and sidetracking us from the faithful servant community. Argument around between those who want to uphold their standards, which tend to be exclusive, and those who strive to be inclusive. Civility is lacking. We forgot that Wesley was the one who minimized the theological differences. He was the one who invited those whose heart was with his heart to give him their hand. Liberal or fundamentalist, he really did not care. A life-giving relationship to God through Christ, that was central to him. We observe from this, he connected it with the root of Christianity in Eastern thought. Though Christianity is a faith of Eastern origins, we have often indulged in the dualistic distinction of Western thought. In the East, the yin and yang are seen as a part of a whole. In the West, yin and yang are seen as a competitor, and win or lose, or main or marginal, or first or last, or saved or damned are important distinctions that had been brought into the church. But none of this distinction have much to do with the extreme love of God for all as proclaimed and led by Jesus. The East, from where our faith has come, refuse to see these dualities as a difference between me and you, but polarities we experience within ourselves. In all children television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Fred Rogers often sang a song of the great theological relevance. The very same people who are good sometimes are the very same people who are bad sometimes. It's the same, isn't it? For me and for you. So authentic faith communities would say amen to the Mr. Rogers, for he affirmed the preciousness of every human life and the temptation to sin in each of us. The very same people who are good sometimes are the very same people who are bad sometimes. Buddhism is helpful in this regard. In the Buddhist mind, reconciliation must envision the future in a way that enhances interdependence. Opportunity must be given for people to look forward and envision their shared future. The Native Americans get this. In Mohawk tradition, leaders must think in terms of 7 generations. Decisions made 7 generations ago affect their present. So decisions they now make will affect 7 generations in the future. I believe they're right about this. Our action now shape life for our great-great-great-grandchildren. I believe a future discourse belongs to offstage leadership in our society. Most congregations today are focused on Sunday on-stage performance. Leadership is usually defined by how pastor and others lead public worship. In no way do I disparage the importance of life-affirming Sunday worship service, but in most congregations, not a lot happen Monday through Saturday. Alan Roxburgh, in his writing in Missionary Mapmaking, and I quote here, "Only when we as a church leader understand that the future is forming off stage and outside the program will we grasp the implication for the reshaping of the life in this new space." Recognition that leadership in the local church is less and less about creating, managing program and them trying to get people into them. The more and more about creating environment that foster interconnections and conversations among the people. Quote Anna. What I bring to attention is that as a key leader in their congregation, pastors need to engage other key leaders in the task of discerning and implementing how their congregation can be in the ministry 7 days per week. Don't misunderstood me. I am not saying a pastor needs to work his or her butt off. I'm saying congregational leaders, guided by their pastor or pastor leaders, need to find a way for the congregation to be in ministry relationship 7 days a week. Church leaders need to know other community leaders. They need to ask clergy of other faith, how can we work together? They need to ask school officers, how can we work together? They need to ask police and fire department, how can we work together? They need to ask leader of service organization, how can we work together? They need to ask a community mental health professional, how can we work together? They need to ask local business leaders, how can we work together? They need to ask local bartender, how can we work together? And list goes on and on. A few years ago, I really met here in Boston, MIT, and other the young Asian Christians. They had invited me to be the retreat leaders. I spent the 3 days, and last time that I asked them, which place is the most favorite place you're gonna imagine to live. And then I found out this quote. I was driving across the country with my sisters and some friends. We were commenting on what makes a place we want to go, or what kinds of a place we would live. And they try to list the factors. We say, it has to be open, it has to be diverse, it has to have a visible gay community, it has to be diverse, it has to have lots of different races and ethnic groups, it has to have people of all ages and be open to young people, it has to have people who look different. So civility is the narrative in an open society. So people are drawn to places known for diversity of thought and open-mindedness. Most actively seek out places for diversity and look for signs for it when evaluating communities. These signs include the people of different ethnic groups and races, and different ages and different sexual orientation, and different appearance, such as a significant body piercing or tattoos. Many in our society want to meet and socialize with the people unlike themselves, to trade views and spar over issues, to be treated with civility when disagreeing, and in engagement of stage leadership that we can involve and embrace in creative discourse, making possible when we seek in a healthy society. So faith community belongs in this off-stage leadership. The off-stage leadership is the making future discourse of our society. Let me just conclude it. It's a few minutes I have. So, about restoring hope. I really want to engage with the Chief Justice, and I know he will share about talking soccer, and which is a tremendous beauty as a communal and as a life sharing in our the many indigenous and native community. I know that restoring hope is difficult, except too many times as we Christians are more concerned about theological difference than about being the servant community of Jesus. In United Methodist Church, self-confessing movement has much financial support and often control the evangelical discourse, but they have gone astray from our root in John Wesley, which has been a model of civility in religious era. Wesley disparaged those who argued about creedal belief. If your heart be with my heart, give me your hand. Summed it up the center of his theology. So his was theology that affirmed the central importance of our personal experience of God. Wesley, in other words, stood in opposition to those who thought their confession of faith bore together a greater importance than the faith experience of others. So exclusionary discourse insisted that we all adopt certain, mostly fundamentalist belief about Jesus. Thus following Jesus become a little importance compared to what we confess to believe about Jesus. This is contrary to the theology and leadership in Wesleyan tradition. Tragically, organizing people of the exclusionary discourse has been to condemn the gay and lesbian sisters and brothers. A biblical as that claim to be, there is no quote or reference or incident from Jesus' life that confirm the prejudice of any such a condemnation. For me, the core of Christianity is not found in what you believe about Jesus, but whether or not I decide to follow Jesus, to shape my life around his own life and teaching. The core of faith is found in what you may or may not believe about Jesus, but it is found in whether or not you are willing to follow him. Let me keep saying that. But nothing about Jesus was narrow-minded. His ministry of love reached out to all those who others in society had made outcasts. And what does it mean to follow Jesus? The gospel stories are clear. They all agree the most important thing for Jesus, the most important biblical commands are to love God with your all being and to love others as you love yourself. The golden rule, to treat others as you would want to be treated. Do you want to exclude or include it? Listen to or preach it at? Or loved or excluded? We find ourselves in a debate between those who would like the church to be more flexible in non-essential matters, more open, and those who would like the church to be clearer about its boundaries, more pure. One could argue that those who expose great openness are holding fast to the biblical principle of hospitality. Those who desire clarity in matter of boundary, however, are adhering to biblical principle of holiness. But the holiness and hospitality are excellent value. Both are biblical value. Both are right. Of course, they can also both be wrong. The problem is this: when we concern ourselves only with holiness, we become rigid and inward looking. We make an idol of our purity. When we concern ourselves only with the hospitality, however, we lose our sense of who we are, and our identity is blurred, and we lose the language of our own faith. Our attitude and belief become ambiguous, and at worst, we no longer know why we are Christians or what holds us together. So either holiness or hospitality can become a problem if we pay attention only to one dimension and exclude the other. Instead, we are invited to live in the tension that is created by holding both values, holiness and hospitality, together at the same time. For God challenged us to expand what is essential for Christians, giving space for others to be, acknowledging that reality is made up of others, loving others by appreciating their differences. So in this beautiful communion and practice of civility, no one is less faithful and less honorable as a member of Christ's body. We are all equal and beloved by God, and we belong preciously to each other. The Pope Pius IX say, to begin, although faith is above reason, there can never be found any real dissension or real disagreement between them, since they both have their origin from the same source of unchanging and eternal truth, the God forever. So let me just simply close this presentation. So the principle of the Civility and Holy Conference is more engaging, not only that where we debate like a conferencing or annual conference, general conference and others, but really in the setting, the life engagement and mutual interweaving as a human being together, and constantly invest their energy and passion for expanding their self into God's self. I think that's the place that we are heading. Then I know that civility is the way of our peace being and peace living. And I hope that our church and our community will constantly model and living it out, that faith, which is more essential than the real doctrinal debate or that really extreme accusation about who is wrong and who is not in that right place. So, thank you again, Dean Elizabeth. It's a wonderful.
Wow. Kamsahamnida. Beautiful, beautiful. Take a deep breath, and I'm going to introduce you to our two respondents who will speak briefly so that we can open to the rest of you, but our two respondents are two wise men themselves. Tom Porter is director of the Religion and Conflict Transformation Program here at the School of Theology, as well as lecturer in Religion and Conflict Transformation. He was a trial lawyer who had a conversion experience along the way and decided to close down his practice and move into a different form of ministry. And that is what he is presently doing. Our other respondent is MAWOKOMATANDA, who is a pastor of a vibrant urban congregation in the center of Worcester, Massachusetts. A very lively multicultural congregation. Shandi is also a doctoral candidate, yes, here at the School of Theology in Social Ethics. The two of them will respond briefly, and then we'll open to all of you.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Bishop Hee-Soo, for your wise words this evening. I was asked to give one insight and one question, and so perhaps my question will be, excuse my voice, I'm just recovering from a little bit of a cold, and I had no voice for the last 2 days, so I might crack a little bit. But my question is essentially, what do you think about my comments? And my comments are as follows. My response is, as you now know, is really coming from a perspective of someone working in a multicultural context, in a congregation in Worcester. And I thank you for your lecture, for speaking to, I think that your lecture speaks to the challenges besetting anyone who lives in a multicultural and diverse context. A simple definition of conflict understands that conflict is two opposing ideas trying to occupy the same space. And I appreciate your reminder that in the East, the yin and the yang are not competitors, but seen as part of the whole. In the presentation, you also talk about the conflict between those who understand, at least your perspective of understanding faith as the core of your faith being found in following Jesus, which stands in opposition to those who might find the faith, at the core of their faith is found in what they believe about Jesus. And this seems to be the conflict between orthodoxy and orthodoxy, right action and right belief. So I'm curious to hear from you, to speak a little bit more about how you would make space for those who have different beliefs in your own thinking. Because not to give away anything that Chief Justice Yazzie would say, but he would say that belief or thinking produces action. It kind of leads to action. So what we believe can also matter in how we act. So the struggle that might happen in the Holy Conferencing and General Conferencing, trying to come up with these principles and ideas, can help form the right action and form the people to react and to practice their faith in a way that might be closer to what you understand as following Jesus. So how would you respond to that idea of belief and action informing one another reciprocally?
We have here two very wise men. I wish you could have been with us for breakfast this morning, because they modeled the best of everything we've talked about. Just a very brief story about Bishop Hee-Soo. I'd never met Bishop Hee-Soo. We show up in Reno to do something together, and he says, "Tom, I did it." And I said, "Did what?" He says, "I just translated your pamphlet on engaging conflict well into Korean." Now, I've never met the man. I can't get my kids to read my books. And here's a man who's never met me, who's translated me into another language.
Without permission.
Without permission. They didn't ask for forgiveness either. But I've been very moved. I was very moved by your story of your family's, your journey through your family's tradition and your understanding the civility of your Confucian father and your Buddhist mother, and the way you come to understand that the more centered you are in Jesus, the more open your boundaries are and open to other traditions. I want to speak about your offstage leadership and conversation, because I found this very generative, and it struck a resonance with me. I think some of the most profound conversations that I've had when I was really off stage. I was in South Africa. I'd gone with a pack on my back. I knew no one, and I went to study the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I left feeling that I knew everybody. And the transformation that occurred caused me to leave the practice of law and start a whole new career. So they were transformative. And one of the lessons that I learned, this is a little bit of an insight, is if you go into these conversations as a learner, not a teacher, not even a leader as such, but a learner with a lot of curiosity and caring, you will have great off-stage conversations. And one of my interests and questions to you, and one of the things I'd love to hear more about, is how those off-stage conversations affect the leaders themselves. John Wesley, Ken Carter, who you know, Bishop Ken Carter is the bishop in residence at Duke Divinity School, has written a lot about John Wesley and Methodism. But one of the most important things he's written is about how John Wesley got to Aldersgate, that great experience where he experienced grace and his heart strangely warmed and very motivational in the founding of Methodism. He says that he got there through his conversations and his engagement at Castle Prison. That it was at the prison, talking to the prisoners, learning about them, hearing their stories, that his heart was cracked open and his being was opened up so that he could receive that grace. I think that's an extraordinary story about how we can be affected. The other thing I'm interested in, I don't want to get us off your all-stage leadership and conversation, because I see that's a very important movement, away from just Sunday to the rest of the week, away from general conferences and focus on general conferences to what happens the other 4 years in between. But I do want to ask this question: how can those off-stage conversations inform our on-stage conversations? And what we learn about the space that is created in those off-stage conversations that allow this kind of conversation to happen, we can create new spaces in places like Sunday morning. Bill Everett, who was a theologian at Andover, Newton, and ethicist, is now building roundtable communion tables in North Carolina. Built one for the Mueller Chapel here, which we worship around. And he has started a movement called Roundtable Worship. So we gather around the communion table, a roundtable communion table. We have a scripture, we have a subject, but together, using a talking piece, we write the sermon together with the wisdom of all the voices in conversation. Now that's a new kind of space. And how do we create those spaces where those kind of conversations can take place? And maybe even at general conference. Now again, I don't want you to get you lost in general conference. I understand that I experienced the same things you experienced there. It's very sad, isn't it, that we bring together 1,000 people, wise, creative people, and they have those kinds of experiences. But how can we create a different space there? Does it have something to do with getting rid of Robert's Rules of Order, developing a more of a peace, a talking circle kind of consensus building, spiritual discernment process that limits itself to a few subjects, not all the subjects of the world, but a few subjects that we can bring our wisdom to? Is there any way that we can provide spaces for those kinds of conversations at general conference? I'm going to leave you with that little question.
I suggest that you stay where you're seated so that, and speak loudly, and if in the back you have trouble hearing, please just wave your hand and they can speak up a little bit. But Chief Justice Yazzie, would you like to respond with an insight or a question before we invite the bishop to join back in?
My question is about kimchi. I'm very happy to meet you. And one of the things that is of great challenge is as you grow up, you think about the future, and then you all of a sudden, you know, decide what you want to do best in life. And then, so the question here is, how do you get from here to my dream for the future? I once, as a young man, wanted to become a minister. I went to the rescue mission where people who drink have to sit through sermon or testimony to earn a meal. So I know when I spoke, everybody had a hangover. We're not in the mood for stupidity or stupid questions. My question for them was, what is life? And I asked the same question of you, Bishop, that as a minister, as the communicator of God, how do you understand life to be? What gives you that spunk? What makes you understand the essence of your work when there is people who don't like you, people who don't understand you, people who say, I wish, you know, I didn't confront you with people like yourself. How do you deal with that thing and be able to say, you know, I can look above and beyond. I have the strength and the hope. I can survive. I can teach others to be the same too.
Well, it is hard. This is difficult to really respond to both of your questions. I believe that, especially my upbringing, that Eastern mind is always to go beyond the text, beyond the canonization, or beyond even the orthodoxy, because the life we believe as a more dialogical narrative. Life is intertwined with the text and context and really multiple flow of life giving. So this interdependence is really go beyond the orthodoxy question. The issue that I am dealing with is very our own Christian orthodox that defined in orthodox is captive by this language-centered or logia-centered mindset, which is really contained in the God's language, the God's proximity in the humanity. It's go beyond that, but in some way we put into the logic. The logic defines the belief. I think that's why the fundamental resistance about that right and wrong, that whole traditional 1,000 years of our argument about, which is really putting that divinity in the box, that God in the box. There is a same context that I believe the on-stage leadership is important, yet if we're not freeing the on-stage leadership to off-stage, then we are keep saying that we are preaching too, but we are not embraced it together or be influenced by the community. I think a biblical text is really fundamentally dialogical narrative. Even the one sentence, the sentence has a subject, object, and an audience. Even the God, deity, is a multiple God within that whole narrative. So already that demonstrates it's not a monolingual or either the one authentic source alone, dominant source alone. And there is so much relationship within the text. ultimately the Western culture, because of dualistic mind, because of that always, that contrast with that duality, and then right and wrong, we kind of put that into the mindset. We are not able to read the discourse of Offstage, discourse of, it's not Sunday and then whole week. That's the kind of one simple paragraph, but Offstage is more relationship, more dialogical, more the paradigm within the communal life. So my imagination is now to answer to you, and especially both of your answer the question, how can we understand God in a narrative sense, as really the dialogical, the narrative which is within in that expression. That means, I think in some way of life or following Jesus is more authentic to me about arguing about which doctrine or which dogmatic definition is right and wrong. So I think that's that's dangerous place, because we are so used to hear the wisdom out of the canon, out of text, out of the sutra. More direct mind is mentored by teacher to student or father to son, the generation after generation. Because the life is passive. So passage has been done through, beyond the logic, beyond our kind of formulation. I'm not saying it's mystical way that I'm saying it, really, because that is the embodiment. That is really that we believe even God moved it into among us, the whole incarnation of language. I think that is amazingly go beyond our logo-centered mindset. I think we need to free our church. I think that's the way we can really changing our general conference format or conference format. We put in the state in the number, and then what is the majority rule and what is it not, somebody's fair and so on. I think that is, again, that we understood God in a very arbitrary way of fixing it. I think that's kind of my response to you. So hopefully we free our people, free our church to really engage in this offstage relationship and the embracement with the whole colorful interaction which is already done outside of church in many places. We as a church are very slow follow in that offstage formation. And how can we free our church to go into that? Seems like our spirit, Holy Spirit is urged us to go there. But it's so comfortable, so institutionally organized that we are not able to go out there. And the Chief Justice Yazzie, I think that's the kind of I'm thinking. The life is beyond the logic, beyond the dualistic clarity, or what is ortho. The ortho is already dialogical. And why we put that as a only source of authentication? I think that's the problem that we are in trouble. So I hope that is answered to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We need to take a very quick stretch break, but I don't want to cheat you out of any comment at all. So if one or two of you have a teeny tiny comment that you'd like to make before we take our stretch break, we can open to that. Yes, please.
Since Bishop Chung mentioned European kind of shit, like uncontained God in a box, so I really appreciate that kind of expression. However, I saw a lot of discriminations are disguised by preference. Yeah, like to me, there was obviously racism or kind of discrimination. But they say like, oh, this is kind of my preference, so I don't like, just that's what I don't like. So, like, in that case, I might guess you have the kind of situations or experience that you have already solved or dealt with. So, if you don't mind, would you share a brief experience for that kind of reconciliation?
You know that sometimes debate or argument or even assertion, those kind of that space is not able to handle the whole human relationship. I think that's why again I'm putting into the offstage of the relationship, the argument there. You felt that you are discriminated, you felt that misunderstood it. But when we engage in more fully, lifelong in the intersection with that colleague or that group or that community, later on my experience was amazingly that awakening can happen through that more broader relationship. So when you put into your argument box alone and you put me in this way and why you put it that way and then why and keep arguing about it, I don't think there's no way there is a chance of life transformation. How you engaging in the relationship, honoring relationship, so that even response, you're not harming, you're not really give any dishonor. And all the way, humble way, you're just living it out. I think that's really offstage because we are so used to the logic. And I debate, I won, then that's that I overcome or I did something. No, later I found out that it's not the point. Really, how can I engage as a fellow human being? And then, yes, I have limit, you have limit, we all have limit. We have sinfulness, you have sinfulness, we all have messed up. So that's why I said, Mr. Rogers, the logic is better than our box of debate. So I hope that it's helpful.
Thank you. We do need to take a stretch break, so I'm going to ask you to stand up and for 5 minutes move your bodies, and we'll come back and hear from Honorable Yazzie.
While you're regathering, I'd like to say a huge thank you to two people who've made this event possible. Ted Karp is the primary planner. He is the person who's worked with Lowell Institute. We owe Lowell Institute a huge debt of gratitude for providing these events for us. We owe Ted a huge debt of gratitude for planning them, for sponsoring this Civil Discourse series for the year, even including it as the heart of the Focus magazine. And we also owe a huge gratitude to Jacqueline Jones, who makes everything happen with smoothness and grace. So thanks to you, Jacqueline, as well. Chief Justice Yazzie is going to begin, and we're just going to flow because everyone has already been introduced.
I was told to make it short, so I'll do that. We believe in good medicine, and good medicine comes with good humor. When I was the Chief Justice, I had a court solicitor who used to see his Navajo wife every week. And he will go to the big city to see his wife. And when he sees his wife, he would say, really hug each other, yat eh, yat eh, yat eh. Then around 8 o'clock, she'll say to him, hit the hay. Then over the weekend, when she gets mad at him, she'll say, what the hay? So I want to thank the good people here, Ted Carp, Canon Ted Carp. I want to thank Tom Porter and Jacqueline Jones for making the arrangement possible. I wish you went home. But good people. And I want to especially thank the Dean, Elizabeth Moore, Mary Elizabeth Moore, for the good introduction. So this is my first time talking at a theological school. Is that okay? I have a secret. Somebody told me to say, I once attended theological school in Ohio. But the school was theological school. And I did my mission work among the Native Americans in Alaska. And so I will just mainly hit the main points in talking about rising commitment, restoring hope, civil discourse in the United States. I don't like to read my speech, you know. It's but sometimes it pays. So I have here, I'm one who, from a perspective of being Navajo in public life, has personal hope given the current situation in the United States, and that drives personal efforts to restore hope for others. And I'm usually thought of as a Navajo traditionalist when it comes to religious belief. But I'm familiar with Christian doctrine. And once I did, have had thoughts for a long time to attend the seminary at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But when I actually went there, I had to change my mind. I said, I gotta see something else first. So I started to talk about, like life. What is it about? And I know there are challenges. And so when I talk about peacemaking, people love to hear, what is peacemaking and what it does. But peacemaking is also described as talk in circles. They mean one and the same thing. And so what I want to do is just to tell you briefly, just so you know what peacemaking, what talk in circles is all about. And before we came here, I had a chance to talk to the restorative justice class. And so what I had to say was that the restorative justice was the creation of the holy people. And that during creation, when the world was to be created, the people, the holy people didn't just create it, they thought the world into its existence. I think that's the kind of approach we need to look at seriously. How did the restorative justice, how was it developed by the holy people? Well, as one medicine man says, chaos, sparks, makes people happen, make things happen. And he said that, some of those chaos was the cause of the holy people themselves. Some just naturally happen. But when we talk about the law of the Navajo people, the traditional law of the Navajo people, I'm not talking about white people's law, that was imposed on us, and they would say this is Navajo. And I'm talking about something that comes from the mind, something that has an origin back to creation. The holy people weren't always holy. They did bad stuff, did bad things to each other. And But what they did is they challenged the perfect model, the creation of a perfect model, like the water, the air, the fire. They wanted to change it. But somehow those things backfired. And they went through 4 levels of the world to save themselves. The holy people, what they did caused the world to catch on fire. They caused the world to freeze. They caused the world to be underwater. Now it's the 5th world. What do we see that is at hand? That we're going to be responsible for it. So when the holy people, were desperate, they were wanting to save themselves. And the medicine man says, how did the holy people survive? They survived because they had to figure a way out to bring themselves together. And they had something that's very special. And I think that's what the church has. They had prayers, they had songs. And in the songs they got notions how to come together, how to solve a problem. But there's always hope, Sometimes things work and sometimes things do not work. They knew that. So as they made mistakes, they sought corrective measures. Terrible big mistakes, they sought corrective measures. And they were able to develop from their experience and said, this is the principle that I understand best. This will be the basis of my teaching. People always say Robert Yazzie is wise. Sometimes I don't know what wisdom is. But what elderlies say to explain wisdom, good communication, is whatever you put yourself into, in return teaches you something good. If you do that enough, then you'll begin to see, where you stand, your mind. And the holy people always in their lifetime, always look for something to guide them. Look for a good source of communication. And they look at sacred conversation. They develop certain principles like the word keh, which is hard to understand in terms of translation, the translation of it into English. Respect, keh means respect, and it's a whole lot of things. Keh is like trying to define what does the word it mean. Try to explain the to the little child. And if you can do that, man, more power to you. That's the kind of job that I have in terms of trying to explain the principles that give us guide, the principles that are considered sacred communication, the principles that can give, they said, tomorrow's going to look like this into English. So what the holy people thought, they saw that the more they addressed problems, the more they found an orderly way of thinking, an orderly way of planning, an orderly way of life, an orderly way of saying this is resilience. So we have peacemaking today, and it was really hard to sell to the community. Just because Navajo speak Navajo, just because we have some custom, doesn't mean that we're open to peacemaking. That was the experience in 1982, when the leader says enough is enough, nonsense. We can't even get, people's problems resolved. We need to find some way, some source of good communication to bring people back together so they can feel that solidarity in their life. Very important. But when we started to do that, things began to change. But that change is a long haul. Things don't change overnight. still there has to be people who are committed to stand behind that process and tell the people, this is peacemaking, and this is what it can do for you. So peacemaking, when I talk to the people at chapters, I used to tell them, pay attention to what is in peacemaking, what is in talking circles. Human relations. And how do we understand human relations in Navajo? We understand from our existing clan system. What I'm supposed to do, if I had a Navajo audience who said, I am born of my mother's clan, I'm born of my father's clan. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, they are Kia'anis and Ashin. Just to give you an idea, the relationship had its origin. So in peacemaking, some people say, well, it's only good for the Navajos. But knowing that today everybody's copying what the Navajos have been doing with peacemaking and making it their own, which is okay. I mean, if you want to do that, claim glory for it, that's fine. But the important thing is this, learning the process, learning what relationship can mean. Even though it's a real challenge, even though, dealing with human relations is the hardest thing ever. But the harder it is, the more you try, the more you begin to appreciate what you have. And I see that, coming from peacemaking. And I see that, the more the relationship, is working in a community, the more people talk to each other. The more people are willing to, help each other. Imagine when somebody's sick, right? And nobody comes to give you words of encouragement. Am I right? You get sick, you get sick. Sometimes, you stay there in the hospital for a long time. But when Navajos get sick, everybody, so when we have a relative who's sick, you see the whole community coming to give their attention to this patient. So the more people come in, the more there is power, to bring these people back to healing, restore these people's mind, body, and spirit. So when there are people who find value in relationship, you can do things with that. Where two or three people are coming together to brainstorm problems, like using the talking circle, they can, do wonderful things. Especially when people begin to talk. Some people will lose faith and say, I don't see how we can ever manage to overcome this particular problem. And the grandmother would say, when it's up to you, if you have that faith, the hope, a sense of resilience, just wait. You'll see something good. And sure enough, things like that happen. So, we're talking about sacred conversation and focus on cross-cultural communication. And, people need to know what that means, cross-cultural communication. And to do what? To minimize misconceptions. Some perceive Indian and Navajo thought as being alien. You listen to how the United States Supreme Court, there are comments about Navajo judges. There are comments about Navajo customs. We write things in plain English and say, this is Navajo custom. And this is how it applies to the situation. They don't read that stuff. Because their misconception is so powerful that they fail to see, who Indians really are. So I can't wait to see the Lone Ranger. Right? Johnny Depp, he promised to do a good role on Tonto. But even then, he used that stereotypical Indian mode of speak and howl. So it just seems like, we need to go beyond that. And how do we do that? And it's very hard to talk to the non-Indians in the mainstream. How people see us makes a big difference. It works against us. But it helps to see some non-Indians who give good examples about cross-cultural communication. I'm talking about John Ladd of Brown University. He just passed away in February 6, 2011. When he was at Harvard, he got a grant, a chance to study, on the Navajo land, and he studied Navajo philosophy. And people have always said, even in history books, always said, Navajos are very simple people. They have no philosophy. Judges are stupid. They don't know, they don't have a sense of fairness. But then John Ladd comes in and says, I want to prove them wrong. So he writes a book, The Structure of a Moral Code, in 1956. And he shows that he communicated well with the Navajos and captured the essence of Navajo belief from the Western point of view. And he encouraged Native Americans to enter the field of philosophy so they can better understand Western culture and articulate their own tribal philosophies. And he shows that kind of respect. The word cat means respect. He used good communication, especially when he made every attempt to explain accurately what Navajo philosophy means and what it can do. It's a very hard task. But I was very impressed when he was being interviewed in the internet. His simplicity, his clarity, his accuracy about what he had to say about Navajo thinking. And I think this kind of a work gives good examples of how cross-cultural communication is possible. And the key from Latin's example is respect from the integrity of other people and their thinking and an accurate recording and explanation of it for a general audience. So let me just read one paragraph of John Ladd's work, just to show you how we can appreciate such an individual. Ladd spoke well of Navajo justice, concepts of justice. He found, which is not surprising to me, that the Western conception of legal justice is alien to the Navajo mind. And the role of a judge or justice giver is not to make awards on the basis of desert, but rather conciliate the parties in controversy and restore social harmony. In other words, Ladd said, these quasi-judicial officers are viewed in the context of facing of choices by the agent, rather than in the context of making of disinterested decisions by a judicial spectator. He went on further in classifying justice in the categories of collective justice and distributive justice. So he's saying that punishment is not a part of Navajo thinking. And he's saying that rather than punishment, the better approach is corrective justice. And the main consideration for that, for Navajos, is what he says, a utilitarian one, namely to prevent a reoccurrence and to rectify the situation rather than the agent. Punishment is the last resort. So when payment has to be made for injuries, the amount evades Western justice thinking, enough so that there will be no hard feeling. Sometimes it's hard to even talk to lawyers about what this means, as to seek justice for the victim. I mean, the way, but, for example, money is not the answer. $1 million, remedy, compensation is not what the elders are talking about. If you did me wrong, then, find a way to restore my dignity. So I can look at myself in the mirror and say, look, I'm okay. Which is what one white man said in the correction center. He came up and said, my daughter was murdered, 3 years old, she was raped. I said, I see that the person who did the wrong is doing life. But that doesn't really matter to me in the long run. What I want to know is, why did you do that? I want some kind of an answer to that. So so you ask the question, what is the amount of such payment to avoid hard feelings? How can that be determined? So Ladd discovered that the proper procedure is the use of talk to prevent reoccurrence. Navajos told him this in their own language. And here, some of them might say, what is talk? How do we go about talking about justice? To me, the term just sacred conversation in relation to religion and personal civil discourse has real meaning in Navajo thought. In relation to Ladd's explanation, offered his approach to cross-cultural discourse as a model. I offer to you my thoughts as to how we can communicate on justice and on sacred conversation using religion as a starting point. Navajos have no word for religion. They don't. And in law, Navajos have no word for right. Well, what kind of a society do we have? No word for religion in the Navajo language. What Western calls religion, we call ina. We don't need to talk about religion. We have our philosophy has that main element of the principles of life. We think of life to guide us. The introduction of Western religion, Christianity particularly, has caused divisions in Navajo society. I mean, there's about, 300,000, a little over 300,000 Navajos. We're all not of the same faith. Some are Christians, some are, use traditional ceremonies and stand by that. And some go to Native American church. So, but the thing that is really, taking a lot of force and maybe causing some lot of dissension and divisions even more. Many Navajos follow evangelical Christianity, and a likely reason for that is that since evangelical clergy need not attend an institution such as this as a prerequisite to climb in the pulpit, it is possible for ordinary Navajos to become clergy and operate a church. So we have people, have big churches and a small hoka on the side. Given the Navajos who are fluent in the language, can be pastors, and that makes the evangelical Christian popular and accessible, and there are many evangelical churches on our countryside. So religion creates a contentious climate for public discourse. And we fight over separation of church and state in the Navajo government. And Navajos. But the interesting thing is that there's no studies done as divided as we may be, the study shows that at the end of the day, Navajos of all faith in varying degrees of consciousness about Navajo language and culture return to and practice what we call SHANDIRAI, which is one way of saying, look at life. This concept of life, it symbolizes sand painting. It symbolizes rug weaving, showing two holy beings who are holding, bonded together by their hand. One is female, the other is male. And when we talk about SHANDIRAI, it's just a way of a guide through life. Something that starts, the prayers of a human being starts when the child is right here. You talk to the child. And there are steps along the way. That by the time the child becomes of age, they know where they've been. They have an idea of what they did wrong or what they did right. So in that respect, you ask them, did you do that? Did you do that? If they did it, they said, yes, I did. And if they didn't, they'll say, no, I didn't do that. Or I didn't cause that. So, what I'm going to do here is, when I was writing this paper, I ran into the word process, right? As theologians, you deal with the term, you theorize and say, how do we apply that theory? And a moment ago, I was here to say that that's my business. How do I understand the theory. I listen to the journey narratives, like listening to a song over and over and over and over. Until, each time you listen to it, you learn a new dimension. So, when I used to work at the Net College as a director. I worked there for 6 years, and my boss was the president of the college. And he told me that it's never been done. But we have an agreement with the Navajo Nation Council, which were 88, now we have 24. He said, you're the best candidate. You're a retired Chief Justice. So you have a pretty good handle on what Navajo justice is all about. What we want you to do is this, is to identify Navajo knowledge and use that and to develop policy, to make law. And so I remember in my interview, I was hoping they don't question me for how do I have a specific path to reach that goal. But later, 2 or 3 years down the having been employed, I was beginning to see how the formation of the tribal government has been mixed. There's an imposed council system, a continuation of that system. There's that imposed adoption of federal structure and separation of powers, and also a very slight acknowledgement of traditional Navajo governance, the principles that was being applied. I mean, people, I went to boarding school since I was, they didn't call, there was no such thing as Head Start. When I first stepped into on the grounds of federal boarding school, I was called a beginner. And for the next 5 years, no one really sat down and taught us English. Everybody was, spoken to in the English language, hoping that somehow you'll get it. And I always had a hard time, understanding what was being said in the English language. But when an interpreter came in, boy, did I appreciate what was being said. So that is still my experience today, is to listen to the journey narratives, what the holy people developed. Our traditional law has an origin. Our traditional law is called the fundamental law. In Navajo, we call it the ne pepe has on it, but says the lay. Here's the law, here's the root. In order to understand the substance of the principles or the values, you have to, it's a must that you visit the origin. And there are people who have stories to give it a good explanation. But there came a time when the 88 council delegate was downsized to 24. And no one really didn't know how to restructure. What is it that the council, the 24, how can they take on the duties and responsibility of the 88 council? And there was a thought that maybe this is an opportunity to come in with some traditional governance principles of the Navajo. The principles that were used 100 years ago, bring it back. And, on this note, we can know the theory, but surely, there's when you see the current imposed system, you can see that there's a real need for transparency. There's a real need for adequate notice to the public about what law is being developed. There's a real need for people's input. And this one, the better you can, make decisions to the public that's acceptable, the better response that will meet the will of the people. So my task was precisely one of how to raise official and public commitment, restore hope to a disillusioned Navajo body politic, and set a framework for civil discourse. It's a hard job, but there was a suggestion from the beginning. Let's look at the United Nations. There's the good principle standards, and let's bring it in. Just translate Navajo, and then work with it. And then we just said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to go into our own experience. We want to, maybe we may not know the stories or the origins of in identifying, what the best, principles that were used 100 years ago. So finally we said, there's 4 components that's very good for leadership. 4 components that anybody can use at any time to solve problems. And that was what we called in Tsahakis, is thinking, nahata, planning, ina, life, sekasin, resilience. I said that is what we need to develop. We define what is thinking. And that's what the traditional people way back, the holy people did. They define thinking so they can better understand what the problem is about. And then you progress into action. And then you progress into how do you solve a problem to give more quality to your life, so you can restore that good life. And the rest is saying that that sekasin is very difficult to explain in English, much less in Navajo. So when we come to the end result, say this is the decision making. Use those four paradigms, the components of the paradigm. So to me, like standing before you in my job, the kind of work that I do, I'm still there doing the same thing. I'm still coming up with theories and say, how do I work this into today's issue? And in doing so, I say, let me think of terms, how I can best articulate those Navajo principles into the English language. Because if you don't, then you're really not getting to the heart of what needs to be done. People say harmony. People say beauty. People say holistic. I said that is exactly what we need to collect and say, what do we mean by that as a matter of custom, as a matter of tradition, as a matter of natural law? So one of the things that help is this, that when we talk about restoring hope, which is very applicable to my work. I have 2 minutes. When I was a judge, I could, go all day, all night. What does the word "Jung" mean? For purposes of developing policy, for purposes of training our mind, for purposes of saying this is a theory, and I think we can surely find a way to put it to use in the day-to-day life. So at a discussion with the Jewish people in Lawrence, Kansas about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we talked about Holocaust. And our first reaction was, why include Native Americans? But at the end of our session, we found that there was a lot commonality. There was a lot that we can learn from each other. And so what I did was one night I was sitting down and said, what can I say about the subject matter tomorrow? And then I thought about restoring hope. And I said, well, I wrote down, when we speak of chaos, the origin story of the twin comes into play. Once the evil forces came in and almost destroyed the whole human race, the holy people sat down and established a plan to find a solution. That is where the birth of changing woman, she made a big difference. And the twins that she gave birth to came in to slay the Naye, the evil monsters. It was a touch and go situation for a while, but eventually they prevailed. From that we can say sometimes that happens in life. Sometimes you prevail, sometimes you don't. Sometimes if you don't prevail, you have to try a different way to get the results. The story of the twins explains in detail how they dealt with chaos. There was the reoccurrence of a Holocaust in a different way. A total destruction of life, period. Ways in which non-Indian do not understand, as well as Navajos do not understand Huzhong, is a good question. People aren't familiar with that word. People always say Huzhong is beauty way, but it doesn't mean that. It is about the holy people and the creation. During the creation period, from the creation period, they dealt with chaos, and they began to find out that life is not perfect. But there is a perfect model, as represented by the word Huzhong. Nothing in this life can be perfect, but the Huzhong sets the standard that life is good as long as you try to adhere to a good way of living. On a daily basis, you live with the ups and downs of life, but the Huzhong can give you a way to access the situation in your mind and plan accordingly to what the mind has to offer to reestablish life. Beyond that, beyond thinking and planning, is the actual doing, the actual reestablishing of life that is practical, that makes sense, that is something that we're not afraid of, that something is going to be okay. When you reach some release, finally, the things that those things are going to be okay. But people seem to misconceive that Jung as whatever I achieve, that's it, no more. But we must be reminded that the holy people say, no, no, no. Just because you seem to have reached Jung, you are not going to be able to stay there. You're going to have to work to keep what you have. Maintain what you have requires that you maintain an orderly way of life. So when we talked about Holocaust, the best thing we can do to teach our students or young ones is to pay attention to the method of how to think about life situation, how to assess for planning purposes, how to understand life as they are with ups and downs, and that they should understand resilience, meaning that they're always on guard, meaning that they should remain vigilant to make sure that bad things that happen does not happen again. So as to remain strong and to remain vigilant. Thank you.
Just one quick question for you. Thank you so much for your comments. And I would like you to at least comment, because I had the benefit of reading your lecture, to talk a little bit about the spirituality of Talking Circle, particularly in the 4 directions that you mentioned in your paper, because I think that was a very powerful insight in your paper that I would like us to also hear.
Shandi's question is sufficient. I just want to make an affirmation. Back in 1997, you taught me at a law school in Minnesota about talking circles, about the relational nature of life. That an offender is someone who's forgotten that he has relatives. You taught me about life and doing justice, and I just wanted to thank you.
Would you like to add a question or a comment?
It is such an honor to sit by you and be a presenter together tonight. And I am a student for this Talking Circle, which is a very community-centered, community-honored, community language. I'm always curious about Talking Circle, that translation is correct or not, because when I observed it, it is not talking. It was a full circle of life together, interacting with the deep sense of silence. Listening circle was the real meaning to me. Yes, there's a talk, but pausing quite a bit of time, and then next person who have feather, and then speak very briefly. Long period of time, community is embracing that speaker with a deep sense of empathetic relationship. So, my question to you is this, not a question, I think my comment is talking. It's very logia. It's really the language that is really that dualistic, descriptive, the tool that we are talking about. Is it really full sense of listening circle? This community sometimes disappears when talking is predominant. I think that's our society's sickness. I know the Navajo practice it in different way. So that's why I want you to probably even answer this question, how we celebrate that there's such a fullness of circle, the community presence, and engaging not only language, but really fullness of the, the empathetic relationship. I I think that's seems like the amazing definition. Thank you for your presentation.
Your question about how do those 4 elements work in talking circle? I think I mentioned earlier that the beginning of creation, that what the Navajo people, the medicine man, did is they paid attention how, the essential elements came to be. And then once they came to be, fire, water, air, pollen, how did they behave with one another? And how did they have their own law? We always talk about these elements having their own law, have their own be esteemed, have their own such internal elements to fulfill what they're meant to fulfill. And so when we look at those, today when the elders talk about talking circles, we don't talk about talking circles. We always talk about which is to restore that goodness in every respect. I mean, which is not any different. I mean, when you're talking to the English people, they always like to label things. They get tired of one label, they shift on to another one, then shift on to another one. Just understand that peacemaking, talking circle, they all mean the same thing. They all have expectation to look at, to define the problem. The more information you give it, the more the means that which you know something. And that's really important when in the talking circle. Sometimes lawyers say, well, talking circle's not for the lawyers, it's for you guys over there. But when you really look at the elements of talking circle, peacemaking, if you see how what in Saha case means, like critical thinking, reflection. Like I was telling the class earlier that when the twins had to defeat those evil forces, they went to the father, and the father said to them, yes, I can help you, but you got to pay attention to me. You got to study, observe, and see the habits of the problem. The one that's doing all the destruction. That I think in the talking circle, that is what people have to do. When people commit suicide, when people are breaking their marriage, they have to listen to not so much, the grounds for divorce, but why, the why of it. They ask people, why is it this way? Why are you doing this with each other? So those questions come from the relatives directly to their, to the son-in-law, daughter-in-law. They treat everybody alike with respect. So I think in the talking circles, it's important to have that element of insahakis, that element of talking with each other, so we can see the dimension, the different dimensions of the problem. You can see all people have their own perspective, and you can see that everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And if they're able to talk long enough, they can see the picture of the problem and what needs to be done. And somewhere along the way, when we're talking about life, how do we fix the problem? People, if they talk long enough, they can actually see that means, we all know what we're doing, and we all know what needs to be done. So that's consensus. And then I think the last one of all is just actually saying, did we do the job? Did we have conciliation? Did we have healing? I mean, they don't say that directly, but in time you begin to find out whether there's real success or not. So that's my short answer to the question.
I promised you a little bit of response, and we're going to run over just a tiny bit to leave space for one of you to ask a short question or make a short comment, please.
So one of the limited resources in peacemaking is time. So we talked about circle process. I was in Tom's class and so forth. We talked about these wonderful, grandiose things. But in the Western world, we're tied to the clock, as we are tonight. And so I wondered in the Navajo tradition if there is a concept of time, and how is it different than the West, and how that is an issue or not an issue for that culture.
Concept of time, if you're looking at the watch, maybe peacemaking is not for you.
It is very important because we are there is the cycle, the soccer cycle that is really birth and rebirthing or creating, regenerating, and so on. Actually, that's the most critical time if Eastern mind, how we define time. I see that Navajo is also have the sequence of the whole myth through remyth and constant, not a distance of the clocking. So I hope that our understanding about that.
In terms of time, people who come together to talk about, how to best meet the best interests of the child who's abandoned, and people sat up, all the way to 2 o'clock until they found a resolution. So, time is not a factor. As long as it takes to restore whatever needs to be restored, that's what matters.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your responses. We don't go home tonight with lots of new ideas only. We do that, but we go home with a challenge to converse, to talk, to listen, and to take peacemaking time. May it be so. Thank you.